Hello, I'm Burrito, and welcome to my third video tutorial on how to play Millia-Rage. Today, we're going to be going over basic mid-screen Okizeme options, basic corner Okizeme options, setting up and utilizing Secret Garden, and second layer mix. Before we get started, I'd like to provide a small recap on how full roaming cancels work, as we'll be working with some today. To use a full roaming cancel, simply input any 3 attack buttons, not including dust, during the FRC window. FRCs have unique properties that RCs do not. FRCs take only 25 tension as compared to an RC's 50, and can even be used on whiff, which you cannot do with a normal roaming cancel. Only specific moves in Millia's arsenal can utilize FRC. For now, the most important FRC to start learning is Iron Savior, as it is the most commonly used FRC in our mix-ups. There are 2 different types of H-Disc setups. There's Meaty Disc, where the disc's hitbox activates before or on the frame your opponent becomes vulnerable after wake up. This setup is typically found off of knockdowns like J2H. And non-Meaty Disc, where the disc's hitbox activates after your opponent becomes vulnerable after wake up. This setup is typically found off of knockdowns like 2D. When deciding on how to mix up our opponent, it is important to understand what options our opponent has. Our opponent's possible options are a bear, up back, counters, reversals, backdash, throws, burst, and dead angle. And a bear is an attack during an opponent's pressure intended to interrupt. It should be noted that throws in this game are active frame 1. One should space properly to punish throws, or use throw safe options. Throw safe options are including, but not limited to, Iron Savior and Bad Moon. One should look to recognize the opponent's reaction to a disc setup and punish accordingly. You can visit the Dust Loop link in the description that lists out what each of our mix options covers. Before we talk about Disc Okizeme, it is important to know that spacing is important. Spacing can allow you to remain in either a throw safe range or inside throw range to bait a throw with a throw safe option. To help us with this, we can utilize something called a micro dash. If you ever find yourself wanting to be closer to your opponent for your disc set, an easy way to do this is with this input, 2366H. We can run a surprising distance before we set our disc with this, allowing us to set up at most ranges. Be warned, this may leave you vulnerable to wake up throw if you miss time or misuse it. Make sure your disc setup ends before the wake up throw window. One more thing, the following combos shown should be changed based on weight class, though how you start these combos stays the same throughout the cast. It will be up to you to remember the previous video's content to adjust these combos for knockdown. On Midscreen disc, here are some good basic options. 2K is a fast, safe, low option, useful for checking our opponent's defensive options. When executed well, 2K can be safe on some DPs. 2S can be a nice option if we're just out of range, or to score us a better combo. Iron Savior is a fantastic, fast, safe, low option. Not only does the startup look like TKBM, it's also really easy to combo off of. 6K is a good but somewhat slow overhead mix-up. Before we mix with Bad Moon, we must learn how to execute it first. Bad Moon is technically an air-only move. We can get around this by performing what is called a Tiger Knee. From the grounded position, we would input 236 as normal, and then input the 9 position to get a jump. By doing this, the game still has our 236 input saved, allowing us to perform Bad Moon almost instantly. Then, we simply press P to get our Bad Moon. Bad Moon has a height requirement, so if you can't seem to get it, try doing it a little bit slower. Millia can also do this with Turbo Fall, which is performed in the same way, but with the K button instead. Notice in the mid-screen situation with TKBM, We try to make the disc hit during TKBM. This is to keep our opponent close. It can allow us to set up another disc for another mix, or use roaming cancel to air combo. Double air dash makes the disc hit on the opposite side in which it was set, making this a cross-up. If your opponent shows they're content on blocking and won't throw your roll, it's a good option from Gatlings like 2K or 5K. By implementing the Tiger Knee we learned earlier, we can use TKTF to cross up. A nice bonus to this fast cross up is it cannot be ground thrown, when executed correctly. Before we begin the throw section, it should be noted that we can OS our throw by pressing 6 S plus H when throwing. By doing this, if our opponent is blocking, the game will throw them. If our opponent is jumping, we will get CS to cover their jump, meaning that if they don't jump FD, we'll get a full combo anyway. Do note that for this to work, we must push our throw in the direction of our opponent, 6 if they're on the right, 4 if they're on the left. Another useful tool for us to mix up with is FB disc. With FB disc, we can mix up twice, and even catch backdash. We can also do cool stuff like this, by using FRC, as we are left in the air after FRC. It should be mentioned that common choices to escape non-meaty disc include backdash and up back, both of which can be beat with one option in micro dash 6P like so. Moving on to corner disc Oki, the most important part is looping back into disc or secret garden to keep your Oki going. Same with the previous section, these combos should be adjusted accordingly with the weight of our opponent. In most cases from these setups, simply changing JS and JK as needed can work for lighter weight classes. If you're unsure, review the previous video. It should be mentioned that in the following clips, to continue our combo off of the successful mix-up, the goal is for the mix to hit and the disc to bounce our opponent off of the wall for us to combo with. The disc allows us to check if our opponent was hit before we continue our combo. The disc must hit after meaty TKBM. To do this, delay your disc set slightly and TKBM as soon as possible after the disc. There are two versions of Secret Garden that we can utilize. Before that, to input directions in Secret Garden, simply hold the direction you want and press the H button. Up to 4 directions can be input. Normal Secret Garden cannot cover our opponent's wake up in time, meaning they can backdash or forward dash in time to get out. We have some options to cover this though. We can send our Secret Garden in the 3 direction to catch a backdash, and a 1 to catch a forward dash. We can also opt to cover a forward dash with buttons like 2S. If we punish evasive options like this a lot on our opponent, we can get them blocking, allowing us to mix up, in a similar way to how we do with H-Disc. Another option we have for Secret Garden is to spend 25 tension and use the Force Break version, which starts out faster and can force your opponent to block on wake up. If our opponent blocks our mix, depending on the mix option we chose, will either be minus or plus. On screen is a chart. As we discussed earlier, the opponent has a couple options for getting out of corner. It is now our job to figure out what they want to do and stop that option. Some of the most popular options include mashing and jumping out. On screen are some options to deal with these. Finally, if all of these options have failed, and we've ended up pushed out slightly out of our TV range, and our opponent is still in the corner, we must accept this is no longer our turn, and we must return to a situation similar to neutral. Now it is our job to acknowledge what character we're fighting, and use the proper buttons to either prevent their approach, or to find a way back in. Like discussed in the first video, we can use our fast ground buttons like FS and 2D to push them back into the corner, and we can use our buttons like JS and JD in the air to intercept air dashes out, or our anti-air buttons like 5P and 6P. Now that we're at the end of the video, I'll provide some of the most basic mix-ups to get started with. With some time, you can start implementing the others shown in this video. I will also give a recommendation on what else from this video to practice for when your implementation of them into your Oki comes. Before wrapping up the video, there's a few things I want to mention. Firstly, in the very first video of this series, I forgot to include recommended control layouts. The reason I'd like to do this is because there are certain advanced but not required inputs for Millia that become nearly impossible without specific layouts. I'm going to leave a comment and a write-up in the description in the first video of the series detailing exactly how to go about your layout if you would like to perform these actions on Millia. Second, I'd like to say that I'm doing my best in this video series to be as thorough as possible and present as much knowledge as I can. This is a very difficult task, and I will likely miss some things along the way. To resolve this, I'd like to finish this series with the current path I had set from the first video. Once the 4 parts are done, I'd like to make a 5th part detailing anything that I may have missed, and go over any miscellaneous topics that I couldn't squeeze into the main series. Who knows, maybe at some point I'll even make matchup tutorials. Before saying what's in the next part, I'd like to say that converting to corner or knockdown off stray air buttons has already been covered in part 2. Thus it will be omitted from part 4. With all that out of the way, up next in part 4 we have complicated Okizeme and optimizing your Okizeme's damage output. Thanks for watching, I'll see you there.